Thank you for the update. Let's bring in criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Joshua Ritter, host of the True Crime Daily Sidebar podcast. Joshua, thank you as always. What factors will the judge be weighing right now in deciding bail?
The judge is going to look at two things. Really, it's about her flight risk and whether or not she's a threat to the community. And those are really what is going to confine the arguments. Flight risk, in any case where somebody is charged with murder, I guess you could make an argument that they don't want to stick around if they're going to be convicted. But it's hard to say that she's a flight risk if she doesn't have any connections outside of the country. And also for whether or not she's a threat to the community. That's where these arguments that the prosecution has made that she may have attempted to procure more fentanyl afterwards might come into play.
So prosecutors have focused on Kouri's internet searches as a big part of their case. She looked up, do I have to take a polygraph? Can the FBI look at my deleted searches online? How problematic will this be for her?
Very problematic. We've seen this come up in other cases where somebody's internet searches really give us an inside understanding as to what they were thinking about at the time of the crime. Now, her attorney, we just heard, made the argument that no, these were made after the fact, and that's an argument that they can make, but I think these will certainly play a role in the judge's determination. It's interesting because this bail hearing gives us an opportunity to kind of get a sneak preview as to what might be presented at trial. And it's a very important hearing, too, because whether or not she remains in custody could have a huge effect on her ability to defend herself at trial.
Why?
Because somebody's opportunity to defend themselves behind bars is a different world than somebody's ability to defend themselves while they're out, able to talk to their attorneys freely, able to participate in their own defense. It's just not the same thing when you're visiting your client through bars.
A couple things that are really interesting and will probably play a big role in this case is, one, investigators say they didn't find any fentanyl in the house. Kouri has said that her husband was a partier, but she also told investigators her husband doesn't do drugs. How will this statement play in this case?
Yeah, it's interesting because the defense is trying to focus on that, saying that there was no other fentanyl in the house, I guess with the idea being that she couldn't have provided it to him if there wasn't other fentanyl found in the house. However, also part of their case is that he was perhaps a secret drug user, and that this was just kind of the growing problem that he was developing unbeknownst to his friends and family, which would lead someone to believe that there might be other drugs found in the house. So it kind of cuts both ways, and it's interesting to see how the prosecution might use this evidence.
What doesn't cut both ways, though, is his statements and warning to family members that if anything happens to me, she did it.
Yeah, that's huge. That is evidence that can be used in court. There's certain arguments that could be made that that's a dying declaration, that he's sharing those thoughts with his friends and family because he also has suspicions of his own wife. Those could play a powerful role in the case if they're able to be admitted by a judge.
Does it hold less water, though, if he didn't go to police with those concerns?
Yeah, but that might be more towards the weight that it's given rather than its admissibility. A judge may still allow it to come in at trial, but then allow the jurors to apply their own, understanding of what kind of weight they're going to give that evidence.
Kouri also, according to court documents, purchased some life insurance policies totaling around $2 million against her husband. Will prosecutors try to point to money as a motive?
I think they are. I think that is going to be a big part of their case, is that this was about money. She had made certain financial moves, apparently getting insurance policies without his knowledge, changing things as regards to the trustee on a trust that he had opened up, whether or not she would become a beneficiary of that. So a lot of financial moves that now, in retrospect, realizing that he was most likely murdered, may play a more important role in the minds of the prosecutors and jurors moving forward.
And again, this is a live look inside the courtroom in Utah for Kouri Richins. She is on the left speaking to her attorney. Joshua, one final question for you. I think part of the reason that this is getting national attention is because she went on the talk show circuit talking about this book, helping kids deal with grief, right? It's so contradictory to what she's being accused of. What do you make of that and some of her comments? And can what she said in some of these interviews be brought against her in the case?
It's really interesting. I've thought a lot about that because if you're the defense, do you want to bring that in as to show that this is not the way that somebody who had killed their husband and had such animosity toward him would behave? But at the same time, if jurors believe that she was involved in this and then set about trying to profit off of his death through this type of a media campaign and writing a book, it may just make them, angrier against her. It may make them more inclined to convict her if they feel that somehow she attempted to profit even after the fact.
Yeah.